The Crystal Voices commander, Sarah Blake, had been staring at the same sector of empty space for 3 hours when the signal hit her ship's communications array like a lightning bolt. The bridge of the UCS Perseverance fell silent as the haunting. Transmission filled the air with sounds no human throat could make. The noise was beautiful and terrible at the same time. It rose and fell in patterns that seemed almost musical, but underneath the alien melody was something that made Sarah's chest tighten with recognition, pain, desperation, fear. "Commander," called Lieutenant David Chun from the communications station, his young face pale as he worked frantically at his controls. "This signal is incredible. It's coming from outside our local cluster, maybe 200 light-years away. The power requirements to broadcast this far must be enormous." Sarah moved to stand behind Chun, studying the wave patterns dancing across his screen. She had been commanding deep space reconnaissance missions for 8 years, ever since humanity had developed reliable faster-than-light travel. And all that time, they had found empty worlds, ancient ruins, and dead civilizations. But never anything like this. "Can you clean it up?" she asked. Chun's fingers flew over his keyboard. Slowly, the static began to fade, and the alien sounds became clearer. As the background noise disappeared, something else emerged from the transmission. Numbers, mathematical sequences, star charts, the universal language that any spacefaring species would understand. "They're trying to communicate," whispered Ensign Rita Martinez from the navigation station. "Commander, they're showing us where they are." The main screen flickered to life, displaying a crude but understandable star map. A pulsing dot marked the source of the transmission, and around it, other symbols appeared. Ships, battles, destruction. "Run it through the translation matrix," Sarah ordered. "Everything we've learned about universal communication protocols." For the next 4 hours, Sarah's crew worked to decode the alien message. What they discovered made everyone on the bridge fall silent. The beings called themselves the Zephrians, and they were dying. The translated message was simple and heartbreaking. The Zephrians were a peaceful species who had never known war. Their world was covered with crystal cities that grew like living things, beautiful and delicate. Their people were tall and graceful, with translucent skin that caught light like gemstones. They had spent thousands of years developing art, science, and philosophy. They had never needed weapons because their world had no predators, no natural disasters, and no conflicts. Then the Ravagers came. The enemy species was everything the Zephrians were not. They were conquerors who moved from star system to star system, enslaving peaceful races and strip mining entire worlds. The Ravagers had given the Zephrians a simple choice: surrender and become slaves, or face extinction. The Zephrians had tried to negotiate. They offered to share their knowledge, their art, their scientific discoveries. The Ravagers responded by destroying one of their crystal cities as an example. Millions of Zephrians died in minutes, their delicate bodies unable to survive the brutal attack. Now the Ravagers were systematically destroying Zephrian civilization, taking their time to maximize the suffering. The surviving Zephrians had used the last of their energy reserves to broadcast their message across the galaxy, hoping that somewhere among the stars, someone would hear their call for help. "Commander," Chun said quietly, "there's more. The signal contains biological data about the Zephrians themselves. They're incredibly fragile compared to humans. Their bones are hollow, their skin is thin, and their entire physiology is adapted for their peaceful world. They literally cannot fight back." Sarah stared at the screen, showing images of the beautiful crystal beings. They looked like living artwork, graceful and ethereal. The thought of such creatures being hunted down by brutal conquerors made her stomach turn. "Set course for Earth," she ordered. "Maximum speed. This goes straight to Colonial Command." The journey back to Earth took 18 hours. During that time, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the alien message. Humanity had been alone in the galaxy for so long that many people had begun to wonder if they were the only intelligent species left alive. Now they had found others, and those others were facing genocide. President Maria Santos received Sarah's report in the emergency session. Room deep beneath the Colonial Command headquarters in Geneva. The room was filled with military leaders, scientists, and government officials, all staring at the holographic displays showing the Zephria message. How reliable is this intelligence? Asked Admiral Robert Hayes, the grizzled commander of Earth's Space Fleet. The mathematical proofs check out, replied Dr. Elizabeth Warren, Earth's leading expert on xenobiology. The signal contains detailed information about their world, their biology, and their attackers. This is either genuine or the most elaborate hoax in human history. It's not a hoax, Sarah said firmly. I've been monitoring deep space communications for years. This signal has been broadcasting for weeks, getting weaker each day. They're running out of power, which means they're running out of time. General Marcus Thompson, head of the Colonial Marines, studied the tactical data about the Ravagers. Their fleet is massive. According to this intelligence, they have over 1,000 ships, including battleships that dwarf anything we've built. We have maybe 300 vessels, most of them exploration ships converted for combat. The Ravagers have conquered dozens of worlds, added Dr. Warren. They're clearly experienced at this kind of warfare. Meanwhile, we've never fought a major space battle against an alien species. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the implications. Humanity was being asked to risk everything for a species they had never met, against an enemy that outgunned them 3-1. President Santos stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. For long minutes, she stared out at the lights of Geneva, thinking about the choice before them. Finally, she turned back to face the room. I've made my decision, she said quietly. We're going to help them. The room erupted in protests. Several officials began speaking at once, arguing about the risks, the odds, the potential consequences for Earth if the mission failed. Santos held up her hand for silence. Ladies and gentlemen, she continued, we became explorers because we wanted to find our place among the stars. We cannot let our first contact with alien life be marked by cowardice. If we ignore this call for help, what does that say about who we are as a species? Admiral Hayes stepped forward. Madam President, with respect, this isn't about cowardice. It's about survival. If we reveal ourselves and lose, Earth itself could be next. And if we do nothing, Santos replied, we condemn an entire peaceful civilization to extinction. I cannot live with that choice, and neither can humanity. She turned to address the room. We will mobilize every available ship. This will be the largest military operation in human history. Admiral Hayes, you have 48 hours to prepare the fleet. The mobilization that followed was unprecedented. Ships from Earth's Defense Force, the Colonial Patrol, and even converted civilian vessels began converging on Earth's orbital shipyards. Engineers worked around the clock to install additional weapons and armor. Marines prepared for combat in unknown environments. Medical teams stockpiled supplies for treating both human casualties and alien refugees. Commander Sarah Blake was given command of the Advanced Reconnaissance Force. Her mission was to reach the Zephrian system ahead of the main fleet and assess the situation. As she prepared her ship for departure, she received a message from her younger brother Michael, who served on Mars colony. Sarah, I heard about the mission. The whole colony is talking about it. Are you really going to risk everything for aliens we've never met? Sarah looked at the image of the graceful Zephrians on her screen, then at her brother's worried face. Michael, Remember when we were kids and that bully was picking on the smaller children at school? You asked me why I got involved when it wasn't my fight. You said it became your fight the moment you saw it happening, Michael replied, understanding, dawning in his eyes. This is the same thing, Sarah said. But now the playground is the entire galaxy. As the human fleet prepared to depart, news of the mission spread across Earth and the colonies. Some people protested, demanding that humanity focus on its own problems. But many more supported the decision. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Families said goodbye to loved ones who might never return. Churches held special services, asking for protection for humanity's warriors. The fleet that assembled in Earth's orbit was a sight that had never been seen before. 317 ships of every size and class, from massive battleships to small corvettes. 50,000 human beings prepared to travel across the galaxy to fight for people they had never met. Asterisk. President Santos addressed the fleet in a live broadcast that reached every human settlement among the stars. You carry with you the hopes and prayers of all humanity, she said. You go not as conquerors, but as protectors. You will show the galaxy that Earth's children stand against tyranny and genocide. Whatever happens, know that you have made us proud. As the fleet entered hyperspace, Sarah Blake stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the stars stretch into lines of light. In a few days, they would drop out of hyperspace at the Zephrian homeworld. They would either save an entire species or die trying. For humanity, there was no other choice. Asterisk, when Deathworlders answer the call, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephrian system. And what Commander Sarah Blake saw through her ship's main viewer made her blood run cold. The once beautiful system was now a graveyard. Thousands of crystalline structures floated in space, like broken glass. The remains of Zephrian orbital cities that had been destroyed by the Ravagers. The planet itself, which had appeared blue and silver in the distress transmissions, was now covered with dark smoke clouds. Massive Ravager ships, black and angular like floating fortresses, surrounded the world in a blockade formation. Count them, Sarah ordered her tactical officer. 1,237 enemy vessels. Lieutenant Commander James Park reported, his voice tight with tension. They range from destroyer-class ships to massive dreadnoughts. Commander, some of those ships are over 5 kilometers long. Sarah watched as smaller Ravager craft chased down the last few Zephrian escape ships. The alien vessels were beautiful, even in their damaged state, curved like seashells and glowing with soft internal light. But they were helpless against their pursuers, built for exploration and art, not warfare. Signal the fleet, Sarah commanded. All ships prepare for combat, and get me a communication channel with any surviving Zephrians. Lieutenant David. Chun worked frantically at his console. Commander, I'm picking up weak signals from the planet's surface. It's the same mathematical language from their distress call. They're trying to respond to us. Can you establish two-way communication? Working on it, ... there. Commander, they're asking who we are. Sarah thought for a moment, then activated the transmitter. Using the simple mathematical language that both species understood, she sent back a message. We are humans. We heard your call for help. We came to fight for you. The response came back almost immediately, filled with what could only be described as amazement and desperate hope. Through the primitive translation system, the Zephrians managed to convey that they had almost given up. They had been broadcasting their distress signal for months, never expecting anyone to respond. Most of their cities were destroyed, their population reduced from billions to mere millions. Commander, Chun reported, they're sending us tactical information about the Ravagers. The enemy species has never faced organized resistance. They conquer through intimidation and overwhelming force, but they've never had to fight a real war. Admiral Hayes's voice crackled through the fleet communication system from his flagship, the UCS Defiant. "All ships, this is Hayes. We are outnumbered. 4-1 by an enemy that has conquered dozens of worlds. But remember what we learned in the Academy. It's not the size of the fleet that matters. It's the skill of the crews and the courage in their hearts. We're going to show these bullies what happens when they mess with Earth's children." The human fleet moved into attack formation. Unlike the Ravagers, who relied on brute force and intimidation, the humans used tactics developed through centuries of warfare on Earth. Their ships moved in coordinated groups, covering each other's weaknesses and striking at enemy vulnerabilities. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded the destroyer squadron that made the first attack. Her 12 ships swept around the edge of the Ravager formation, their weapons firing in precise volleys. The enemy fleet was caught completely off guard. They had expected the small human force to attack head-on with the Ravager's superior. Numbers would overwhelm them. Instead, the humans fought like wolves hunting a herd, striking from multiple directions and then disappearing before the confused Ravagers could respond effectively. Rodriguez's squadron destroyed 15 enemy ships in the first 10 minutes of combat. The Ravager fleet commander, a brutal warrior named Thicmer, screamed orders at his subordinates, but the Ravager ships were slow to respond. They had been built for intimidation, not for real combat against an enemy that fought back. Commander Rachel Kim led the human fighter squadrons into battle. Her small, agile craft swung around the massive Ravager dreadnoughts like angry hornets. The Ravagers had never developed effective point defense systems because they had never needed them. Their previous enemies had been peaceful species like the Zephrians, with no military experience. "This is almost too easy," Kim reported to Admiral Hayes as her fighters exploited gap after gap in the enemy's defenses. "Their ships are big and scary-looking, but they're not designed for actual combat. They're designed to frighten civilians." The battle's turning point came when Chief Engineer Ben Torres made a desperate decision. His ship, the UCS Marathon, had been badly damaged by enemy fire and was losing power. Rather than retreat, Torres ordered his crew to abandon ship and then piloted the Marathon directly into the largest Ravager dreadnought. "Tell Earth that we did our duty," Torres broadcast as he overrode his ship's safety systems. The Marathon struck the enemy vessel and exploded in a burst of nuclear fire. The massive Ravager ship, which had seemed invincible moments before, broke apart like a child's toy. For the first time in their history, the Ravagers had lost one of their great dreadnoughts. The psychological effect was devastating. Ravager crews who had never known defeat suddenly saw their most powerful vessel destroyed by a single human ship. Panic spread through their fleet as individual captains began to worry more about survival than victory. Admiral Hayes saw the enemy's confusion and pressed his advantage. "All ships, execute attack pattern Gamma. Hit them while they're disorganized." The human fleet struck like a hammer blow. Ships that had been carefully coordinating their attacks suddenly found themselves facing human vessels that seemed to be everywhere at once. The humans had learned their tactics from Earth's ancient naval battles, adapted for space warfare. They used speed, coordination, and tactical superiority to overcome the enemy's numerical advantage. Meanwhile, Colonel Maria Santos led the human ground forces in a desperate mission to rescue Zephrian survivors. Her Marines had trained for combat in different environments, but fighting on an alien world presented unique challenges. The Zephrian homeworld had lighter gravity than Earth, which made human soldiers stronger and faster. Their powered armor allowed them to function in the planet's thin atmosphere. Most importantly, the Marines were fighting for something they believed in, the protection of innocence. Santos's forces found thousands of Zephirians hiding in the ruins of their crystal cities. The aliens were even more fragile than the humans had expected, with translucent skin and hollow bones like birds. Many were injured, unable to care for themselves in the aftermath of the Ravager attacks. Asterisk. Set up field hospitals, Santos ordered her medics. Treat the wounded. Get them to safety. We're not leaving anyone behind. The Zephrians had never seen anything like human soldiers. To them, the Marines looked like creatures from a nightmare world, short and solid and built for violence. But they quickly learned that these frightening aliens had come to save them. Dr. Emily Watson, the expedition's chief medical officer, worked tirelessly to treat both human casualties and Zephrian refugees. The aliens' biology was fascinating, but challenging. Their bodies were optimized for their peaceful world, with no natural resistance to injury or disease. They're like living flowers, Watson told Santos as they worked to save a group of Zephrian children. Beautiful and delicate, but so fragile. How could anyone want to hurt them? The space battle raged for hours, but gradually the humans gained the upper hand. Ravager ships that had seemed unstoppable began to retreat. Their crews, who had spent decades bullying peaceful species, had no idea how to fight an enemy that actually fought back. Thekmer, the Ravager commander, sent a desperate message to his subordinates. These humans are monsters. They fight like demons. How can such small creatures be so dangerous? Admiral Hayes intercepted the transmission and smiled grimly. That's right, he muttered. We're from a death world, and we're here to teach you what that means. As the battle reached its climax, the last Ravager dreadnoughts began to flee the system. The smaller ships followed, abandoning their blockade and leaving the Zephrian world free for the first time in months. The victory celebration was short-lived. The humans had won the battle, but the cost was enormous. Thousands of Zephrians were dead, their beautiful cities destroyed. The survivors would need years to rebuild their civilization, if they could rebuild it at all. But something had changed in the galaxy that day. Word of the battle spread to other star systems, carried by trading ships and communication relays. For the first time in generations, the Ravagers had been defeated by a species that refused to surrender. President Santos received a message from Admiral Hayes 3 days after the battle. Mission accomplished, Madam President. The Zephrians are free. But we've received over 200 new distress signals from other species across the galaxy. It seems our reputation has preceded. U.S. Sarah Blake stood on the bridge of her ship, watching as human medical teams worked alongside Zephrian survivors to treat the wounded and begin the long process of rebuilding. The crystal beings still seemed like living artwork to her, but now she could see something else in their large, luminous eyes. Hope. A young Zephrian approached her, moving with the grace of a dancer despite his injuries. Through the translation system they had developed, he managed to communicate a simple message. Thank you for answering our call. We will never forget that when we cried for help, the humans came. The human fleet prepared to return to Earth. But they knew this was only the beginning. They had proven that humanity would not stand by while innocents suffered. They had shown the galaxy that Earth's children were willing to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. As the ships entered hyperspace for the journey home, Sarah Blake thought about the future. Humanity had found its place among the stars not as conquerors, but as protectors. They were the species that others could call when the darkness came for them. The galaxy would never be the same. Asterisk.